This is BBC News. I'm Samantha Simmons. Our top stories. Nearly 40 people have been killed in flooding in Japan. More than 1.5 million people are being evacuated from their homes. A double bomb blast has rocked the Somali capital Mogadishu, where Somali security forces are engaged in a gun battle with militants. A Brexit breakthrough. After intense negotiations, the British Prime Minister says her top ministers are backing her plan for leaving the European Union.
And the last two places in the World Cup semi-finals will soon be decided. England play Sweden, while Russia face Croatia.
Hello and welcome to BBC World News. At least 38 people have been killed and nearly 50 others are missing after heavy rain caused landslides in Japan. The torrential downpours have forced more than 1.5 million people to be evacuated from their homes in western and central areas of the country. And now Japan's meteorological agency is forecasting record amounts of rain over the next few days. Joanna Jolly reports.
It's been decades since the central and western areas of Japan have seen rainfall as intense as this. Vast areas in the main island of Honshu have been inundated with muddy water as rivers have burst their banks. Many of those killed have fallen into and been swept away by the fast-flowing floods. Hundreds of homes have been destroyed and factories have been forced to halt production. This is a mountainous area and the authorities have warned against the threat of mudslides, which have already claimed several lives. Japan's infrastructure has also suffered, as roads have crumbled and rail lines have been broken in half. 50,000 police officers, firefighters and members of the defence forces have been deployed to rescue those cut off or flooded out of homes. Officials have told the public to be vigilant against further danger from landslides, rising rivers and strong winds.
Heavy rain will continue in the area from western to eastern Japan, and it will be historic torrential rainfall, which could be the heaviest rain ever recorded.
Forecasters say it looks likely that the heavy rains will continue throughout the weekend. Joanna Jolly, BBC News.
The 12 boys trapped in a cave in Thailand have written letters to their parents saying they shouldn't worry and that they're feeling strong. It's the first communication the boys have had with their families since they got stuck 2 weeks ago. Officials believe the weather conditions over the next few days are looking favourable for a rescue attempt. Let's go to Dan Johnson, who's outside the cave in Tham Luang. Dan, welcome to you. Obviously night time there, but what is the latest with the rescue attempts as far as you know?
Yes, the sun just setting after the 14th day of this ordeal for those 12 boys and their coach, and this is the first day they've had any real contact with their families, with the outside world really, beyond the divers who managed to reach them earlier this week. They've managed to exchange letters with their parents, with their families. We know that letters were taken in to them last night and they've been writing letters which have been brought out and delivered to their parents, and some of that has been shared with the media, so you get a sense of how these boys are feeling. The overwhelming message is that they say they're feeling strong, that they're okay, that they are coping all right with this ordeal, but they also talk about some really ordinary things that actually bring home what we're talking about here, just young boys between the ages of 12 and 16, a lot of them talking about the sort of food that they've been missing, the sort of food they're looking forward to enjoying when they are freed. One saying that he'd like his mum and dad to bring him a Thai barbecue as soon as he can get free. One asking for fried chicken, others saying that they want the favourite dish that their nan used to cook for them. We also had an exchange of letters with the 25-year-old coach who led them into that cave 14 days ago, 2 weeks ago now. He's actually written a letter to the parents saying that he's sorry for what's happened, that he feels that he is responsible, but he also said he's doing his best to take care of them as best as he can while they are in there. And parents, most of them have written to him saying that he shouldn't feel that way, that he shouldn't blame himself, that they understand he was not responsible for what happened when they innocently went to explore that cave 2 weeks ago, but then found the water level rising when it started raining. Now that is still a concern, that there could be more rain on the way, but the officials in charge of the operation think they've got a window of 3 or 4 days, so this could be an opportunity to try and actually properly mount a rescue attempt now. But we're still not sure exactly what form that will take. They've been digging holes right across the mountainsides here, trying to find the shortest distance to tunnel down to them, but we know they're at least 200 metres short at the moment. They've been teaching the boys to swim, teaching them how to use scuba diving equipment, but the man in charge of the operation said last night he wasn't convinced they're ready for that yet. He said if there is time, he wanted them to have more of a chance to get more comfortable with that equipment before they try and make a rescue attempt via that method. But he has said if it does start raining, if the water level starts rising, then they will put that rescue attempt into action as soon as possible to get them out as quickly as they can.
OK, Dan Johnson in Thailand, thank you for now. There have been 2 blasts in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, just moments apart. The first was a car bomb attack near the presidential palace, and the second happened opposite a police building. The armed group Al-Shabaab says its fighters carried out the double attack. According to the local sources, the group then stormed the Interior Ministry's building, where they are fighting Somali security forces. There are reports of deaths and injuries. Well, with me now is our Africa editor, Mary Harper. Mary, welcome to you. What's the latest situation on the ground? Is the fighting still going on, do we know?
Yes, I've been in touch with people on the ground, and they say that the Al-Shabaab fighters have been engaged in fierce gun battles with the Somali security forces. There are reports that some of the Al-Shabaab fighters have been killed, but the fighting is not completely over yet.
Tell us more about Al-Shabaab, because they've been continuing these bombings, this campaign of violence for many years, haven't they, in the country?
Yes, Al-Shabaab has actually existed for more than a decade now. It first emerged in 2006, so it's one of the longer-lasting jihadist groups across the world. And even though it's been pushed out of many of the major towns and cities in Somalia, the fact that it can still attack right in the heart of the capital, Mogadishu, shows that it's still a force to be reckoned with. And it also controls massive amounts of the more rural territory, and it has control over millions of Somalis, making them change their lives in lots of drastic ways.
As you say, they've been operating for more than a decade. What is the government there saying they're trying to do to counter this huge security threat to the country?
Yes, the government keeps promising people that it's going to defeat Al-Shabaab. It has 21,000 forces from the African Union. President Trump has increased drone and other attacks involving US special forces. And so even though they keep promising that they're going to rid the country of Al-Shabaab, in the last couple of years Al-Shabaab has actually gained more territory than it had previously, so they still have a very long way to go. OK, Mary, thank you. Let's take a look at some of the day's other news now. And the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has wrapped up his visit to Pyongyang in what was described as his make-or-break meeting with the North Korean leader's right-hand man, Kim Yong-chol. It was Pompeo's 3rd trip to Pyongyang and the first since the historic summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. Leaving the North Korean capital for Tokyo, he described the 2-day talks as very productive and said progress had been made. Pakistan's former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif says he will return from London to appeal against his prison sentence for corruption. A Pakistani court sentenced him to 10 years in jail over charges related to 4 London luxury flats. His daughter and political heir, Maryam Nawaz, was sentenced to 7 years in prison. More details have been released about Donald Trump's visit to the UK next week. The President and First Lady will arrive on Thursday. He'll meet the British Prime Minister Theresa May and also Queen Elizabeth, but will largely avoid London. Large-scale protests are planned. Theresa May has won the support of her cabinet to negotiate a deal with the EU that will keep the UK closely aligned to Brussels after Brexit. The breakthrough happened at the end of 12 hours of talks at the Prime Minister's country residence, Chequers. She says the plan will be good for the UK and good for the EU. Well, let's talk to Sam Lowe, who's the Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for European Reform and is live in London for us. Sam, welcome to you. What do you make of what you've heard come out from this meeting and what you think Europe's response might be? Theresa May says it's going to be good for Europe and it's going to be positively received in her view. What do you think?
I think it's less a question of whether the EU rejects this proposal. It's more a question of when. As in, this is probably the first coherent proposal that the UK has put together. It acknowledges trade-offs. It says that we want to remain in the single market for goods, effectively in a customs union, but we don't want freedom of movement, and in return we accept we can't have the same arrangement as now in regards to services. This is asking the EU to split up its 4 freedoms, something it said that it won't do. However, there's going to be some delicacy on the EU side, I think, because they know that what Theresa May is actually talking about now is something that will be negotiated later. It will be negotiated once the UK has left. But by putting this on the table, it perhaps provides her the political cover needed to make some of the concessions necessary to actually sign off on the withdrawal agreement, which is what needs to be decided before March next year.
Yeah, because the EU said they would not accept cherry picking, didn't they? They said you can't have your cake and eat it. You want it out of the EU, then you exit the customs union, etc. But the EU also needs this sorting out, don't they? Because most of the EU's trade, the single largest exporter, is the UK. So they need this sorting out for the sake of their trade.
Absolutely. The EU would love to have a continued close relationship with the United Kingdom. They know that Brexit is going to be bad for them economically as well. However, in the face of sort of global disruption to the world legal order, with Trump sort of marching around the world, with Putin also, getting his own way in different ways, different areas, the EU can't really afford right now to disrupt its own legal order to accommodate a country on the way out, because it needs to actually, in order for its longevity, in order for its long-term future, it needs to keep its single market together and actually create this stability.
So it's taken the British government 2 years to come up with this. They're now taking it to the EU. We heard from Michel Barnier before this meeting that the EU might be willing to shift its position if the UK relaxed some of its red lines, we heard. What do you think the EU will be prepared to negotiate on? What are their red lines here?
Well, so the big one here is freedom of movement, because the UK could legitimately make the case that actually the EU has split its 4 freedoms before. The agreement Switzerland has with the EU is essentially single market for goods. It doesn't have a customs union, so there's some differences. But yes, essentially single market for goods. But the key issue here is that they do accept freedom of movement. So for the UK to get something similar, you think they'd at least have to put that on the table. But then once the UK has put freedom of movement on the table, why are they cutting off their services sector as well? Why not go for full single market membership?
OK, Sam Lowe, really good to get your thoughts today. We'll have plenty more reaction on this, of course, throughout the day. But for now, Sam, thank you. Stay with us on BBC World News. Still to come.
Sweden face... At the World Cup, it's crunch time here as the last 2 places in the semi-finals will be decided. England play Sweden and Russia face Croatia.
This is BBC World News. The latest headlines. Nearly 40 people have been killed in flooding in Japan, and more than 1.5 million have been evacuated from their homes. A double bomb blast has rocked the Somali capital Mogadishu, where Somali security forces are engaged in a gun battle with militants. All right, let's take you back to the World Cup action now. The quarter-final games are all ahead for us today. Rajini Vaidyanathan is in Moscow for us. Rajini, I guess the tension really must be building now. Just under 2 hours to go until the England-Sweden kick-off.
Yeah, let's just remind our viewers that the first 2 places in the semi-finals were decided last night. Brazil out of the World Cup, which was a big deal last night, but Belgium are through, and they were beaten in quite a dramatic match, and France also went through in the other of the quarter-finals. But today, the last 2 places in the semi-finals will be decided. As you say, in a few hours from now, England will take on Sweden. None of the matches are actually here in Moscow, but there is still a huge atmosphere as fans who didn't get tickets are gathering ready to watch that match. And where you are, Sam, as well, there's a huge anticipation even at Buckingham Palace, where I think we can play you the bands of the Guard Division who have been playing in honour of England. So the bands of the Guards Division there. Just some of the people getting in the spirit back in the UK. Now, of course, that match takes place in Samara. Our correspondent Sarah Rainsford is there for us. Sarah.
Well, yeah, the crowds are starting to build here. The turnstiles are open, of course, and we're here at the Samara Arena, this stadium which looks a bit like a UFO. And outside at the crowds as they build, lots of them have come in to do the traditional thing, which is to get their faces painted. This man here getting the St George's cross painted on his face, the flag of England, of course. There's a Swedish flag just over there on the other side. And lots of people, too, getting the Russian flag painted on their faces because Russia plays tonight. And I guess a lot of the people in this crowd will actually be Russian. This is, of course, Russia's World Cup. That's the mascot over there, Zebuvaka, the Russian wolf. So the atmosphere building, as I say, the crowds building. It's interesting to see how many England fans will actually make it here because, of course, at the beginning of this tournament, there wasn't a huge crowd from England. But as the teams progress through the tournament, as they've reached this quarter-final, the crowds have begun to grow. And we've actually been speaking to England fans who were watching the team beat Colombia on penalties and who decided there and then that they had to be here. And they immediately got tickets, they immediately jumped on planes, and they've made it now here to Russia, to this city on the Volga, to be part of the excitement, part of the action as the team takes to the pitch here. So the mood great here, extremely friendly, lots of people from all over the world having a huge amount of fun. And now, of course, the focus is about to turn towards the stadium behind me and what's going to happen in there on the pitch. England fans absolutely convinced that they can make it to their first semi-final in 28 years. Well, let's see.
Okay. Well, Sarah Rainsford there. We will continue to speak to you throughout the afternoon here in Russia. Well, earlier today, I was lucky enough to speak to former England captain Alan Shearer about how he thinks his team, or his former team, of course, the team he's still supporting, will do in this World Cup.
For what we lack in ability, because we're by no means, I don't think, the best team in this tournament, but we more than make up with courage, togetherness, team spirit, and that can take you a long way. And this England team have got bundles of that, as they proved in their last game.
You've been in their shoes, obviously former captain. What do you think the boys will be going through ahead of the big match?
I always think it's far easier being a player than it is being a supporter. I'm far more nervous watching on the sidelines because as a player, you know, you can do something about it. You can affect the situation. Whereas a fan, you sat there raggedy like everyone else is watching.
What routines did you have before you went out and played a big game? You know, did you have a funny stretch or some kind of song that you sung?
No, I was pretty normal compared to some players. I wasn't one to put a right sock on first, or shorts on last, or top on last. No, I was pretty normal. The only thing I didn't like doing was I didn't like actually shooting and finishing in a warm-up before the game, because I always felt if you scored a 20 or 25 yard in the warm-up, then it's probably not going to happen in the match either. So I tended not to have too many shots at goal.
You played alongside Gareth Southgate, the manager. How much has he turned the team's fortunes around?
Yeah, a lot of credit must go to Gareth, because he's been a calming influence. He's worked with a lot of these boys before in the younger age groups. They all respect him. He's done everything possible that's been asked of him, and he's done it in the correct way, in the sensible way. He's a nice, honest, genuine guy who deserves success.
Who do you think's going to take the cup? Obviously going to say England,
well,
if not so. England.
Well, Belgium have been very impressive, as have France, but of course they now play each other in one of the semi-finals. It's going to be tough. If England can get through this group, as we know, it's anyone's. It's been so unpredictable, this tournament has, so it's very difficult to say who's going to win it.
But you still think England could do it, obviously?
England have got as good a chance as they're ever going to have again. This might be. They might never get this chance again, some of the other players. The way it's worked out for them, the way the group has turned out, and of course the way the semi-final could turn out. So it's an incredible opportunity.
The chance of a generation for the England team, and lots of anticipation. Now, Alan Shearer is fronting the BBC's coverage in the UK of that match, alongside former England player Alex Scott, who I also spoke to earlier.
For me, it was about looking on. I want to get past this stage. I do not want my journey to end right now. And that was my motivation. Just the fear of going home the next day on a flight. I didn't want to be at home watching a World Cup final. I wanted to make sure I got as far as I could.
And just very briefly, not getting into politics, but you were one of a number of footballers who was invited to meet Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
How surreal was that?
It was really surreal, and I went back and forth whether I should post the picture and talk about that I went because of the politics side, but I was there. We were talking about football, the power of world football and what that can do, and for me posting that picture, I think it was a very powerful statement because I wanted people to see the journey that I've been on, that I was that young girl playing football in a football cage in the East End of London to where I am now, and that's what football's given me, and hopefully that can be an inspiration for others back home that, you know what, if you dream big, just go and achieve it and you can make something of yourself.
So Alex Scott speaking there. Well, it is worth mentioning, of course, that the other big match today, which will decide the last place in the semi-finals, is Russia taking on Croatia. Russia, of course, the home side, who have exceeded all expectations in this World Cup. They started this tournament bottom ranking, and now look where they are.
Regina, you can see some people starting to gather behind you. What's the atmosphere there like today?
Well, it is worth mentioning, Samantha, that there are no matches actually today in Moscow, but people have come here from all corners of the world, and many of them, including England fans actually, don't have tickets. So a lot of them are just coming into the centre of Moscow to, you know, gather in bars, coffee shops, or even just outside to watch the action. And the real focus here in Moscow is, of course, the home nation, Russia. Lots of people walking around with Russian flags painted on their faces. It will be a massive victory for them, Samantha, if they go through to the semi-finals. As I said before, they have really confounded expectations by getting this far in the tournament. And Russia's really done a good job in hosting this tournament. It's gone off really well, despite some fears people had. I think people have put the diplomacy and the politics to one side and really looked at how much this has been a celebration of football. So if they do win tonight, I can only imagine how crazy this city and this country will be.
You will not be getting any sleep tonight if that does happen. Regina, thank you. Now, a show of freedom or sexism. 5 young women are policing the streets of Rummana in Lebanon wearing shorts, and it's causing a bit of a stir in the media and online.
It could be sexy for some people and ordinary. It depends on your education.
In my opinion, I believe it's inappropriate.
I'm Pierre Ashkar. I'm the mayor of Rummana. Every year trying to make a shock to attract the international media and to attract the local people and the tourists to Rummana. It's pretty, okay, and people like pretty. Do you want it ugly? Everything is changing in the world. At a certain time, wearing a jeans was vulgar. Women are free, sexy or not sexy, it's a free country.
انه هيدا حبت البلديه انه تعرض علينا هذا الجوب انه شيء جديد بلبنان حتى بس نفرجي كل العالم انه نحن مثلكم. ليش لا نلبس شورتات؟ ولاد جماعات يعني كلنا ما فيش حدا اندر ايج، كلنا 20 وطلوع.
هي ما في مشكلة فيها أبدا، نحن لابسين شورتات طوال مش عم نعرض إجرينا، وأنا يمكن قبلت بهالأوفر الشغل لأنه كثير تناسب، يعني إنه أنا على طول بلبس شورت، حسيت ما رح أغير بكوستيمي، رح ضلني ذات الشيء بالشغل.
شيء مسموح بلبنان، ليش لا؟
It's only a marketing issue.
فكرة حلوة وفكرة منيحة وحلو الواحد يشوف هيك بنات حلوين.
I think it's inappropriate for girls, the police also in general, and the government.
Everybody is happy.
Well, let us know if you're happy or not about that story. Get in touch with us on Twitter. I'm at Samantha TV News. Love to hear your thoughts. Now, just before we go, let's just show you the live shot of the football stadium in Samara in Russia. This is where England are going to play Sweden in the World Cup quarter-finals in just under an hour. Just over an hour and a half's time is going to be the kick-off there. We know that certainly English fans have tried their best to head there, but it's been really hard to fly out there. It's quite a remote part of Russia, and also really difficult to get hold of tickets unless you had them before the game already. Of course, we'll have full coverage of what happens there. All the England fans crossing their fingers. Lots of celebrations, hopefully, later on today. Stay with us. More to come later.
Hello then. The weather forecast for Europe has all been about high pressure in recent days and weeks, hasn't it? Not much change actually in the story. The satellite picture showing that there's hardly cloud in the sky. Two areas to point out to you. One, a weather front pushing into Scandinavia. That'll bring eventually some rain into the west of Norway. Another, a system moving its way through the southeast, and that will bring some rain perhaps towards the east of Serbia. If we look at that in a little bit more detail, Macedonia over to Bulgaria and maybe the north of Greece. But Turkey, the Greek Isles, fine, settled and sunny. A good slice of sunshine across Italy through France, where the heat's building here. A few heat of the afternoon showers across Spain, but Spain and Portugal still temperatures perhaps widely into the low 30s. A similar story for Paris. Look, 31 degrees, hot and sunny across the UK, up into Germany and the Low Countries. There's that showery rain into parts of Norway. So that's the story then. As we move into Monday, not that much in the way of change. There could be some localised flooding from that rain moving through Bulgaria if it lingers for even further. Elsewhere, it's all about the dry, settled, sunny weather conditions. And guess what? More of the same to come throughout the week. Hardly a drop of rain to be found, and temperatures still high 20s, low 30s. We could see a little bit of showery rain and a cooler feel into Germany perhaps through the middle of next week.